Good day to all. Welcome to another topic on the subject organization and management. This time we will discuss about the leading and controlling functions of management. For this week, we will discuss the topics you see on the screen. Please take some time to read it so that you will be able to familiarize our topics for this week. First, let us define what is leadership. The dictionary definitions of leadership are the following: the act of leading, the ability to lead, and ruling, guiding, or inspiring others. According to Peter DeLille, leadership is the ability to influence others with or without authority. Another good definition of leadership is given by Professor Warren Bennis, and according to him, leadership is a function of knowing yourself, having a vision that is well communicated, building trust among colleagues, and taking effective action to realize your own leadership potential. Now let us differentiate leading from managing. And to do that, let us see a comparison between a leader and a manager. So as you can see here on our table, we have 3 different rows, and we have the columns for the leaders and managers. So here we can see that leaders are followed by others, while managers control others. We can also see that leaders seek improvement through change, while managers seek stability and predictability. And lastly, we can see that leaders do the right things, while managers do things right. So this is the concept of effective versus efficient. And basing on this table, we can safely assume that a good leader must also be a good manager, and a good manager must also possess the qualities of a good leader, so they come hand in hand. Before moving on to the theories of motivation, let us first define motivation. So motivation is defined as the use of rewards and punishments to influence desired behavior. Normally, good behaviors are rewarded while bad behaviors are punished. So this is motivation. And motivation must be used properly by leaders and managers in order to attain desirable effects. After knowing the definition of motivation, let us now discuss some theories of motivation. There are plenty of theories, but for this week, we will limit ourselves with the following theories that we will be discussing. First, we have the traditional theory. In the traditional theory, it states that money is the primary motivator. And in this theory, it states that employees or workers in general are motivated because of the money they receive from their job. Next, we have the hierarchy of needs. This was proposed by Abraham Maslow. According to this theory, humans have level of needs that must be satisfied in order, from the lowest needs to the highest needs. Meaning, we first satisfy our basic needs before moving on to higher needs such as safety needs, love and belongingness, esteem, and the highest need, which is self-actualization. Next, we have the theory X and theory Y. This was proposed by MacGregor, and according to this theory, it is the concept of authoritarian versus participative style of management. We will no longer discuss deeper on this because this was already discussed in the previous weeks. Another theory of motivation is the achievement theory. Achievement theory states that an individual's ambition to do things better or achieve something is due to a specific motive or need, meaning people are motivated to work because they want to become better in doing things or they want to improve and at the same time satisfying a need or motive. We also have the theory of equilibrium, or more specifically, this is Barnard Simon's theory of equilibrium. According to this theory, the inducement or the enticement given by the organization must be kept in equilibrium with the contribution of the employee. In other words, equal wages or salaries must be paid for equal work. The more contribution you give to the organization, the more pay you receive. And the less contribution, of course, the less pay you receive. And we also have Vroom's preference expectancy theory. This theory is based on the premise that an individual assigns values to the outcome of each alternative course of action, meaning if a certain course of action brings more benefit, the employee will tend to go for such. Next, we have the reinforcement theory. This was proposed by B.F. Skinner and Associates. So reinforcement is the process of shaping behavior by controlling the consequences of the behavior. In the reinforcement theory, a combination of rewards and/or punishments is used to reinforce desired behavior or extinguish unwanted behavior. So in general, good behaviors are rewarded or reinforced, while bad behaviors are punished or discouraged. Next, we also have the maturity theory. In this theory, it contends that as people grow psychologically, or in simple words, they mature mentally, they strive toward the highest level of need. Next, we have job enlargement. So job enlargement means increasing the scope of a job through extending the range of its job duties and responsibilities, generally within the same level and periphery. Job enlargement involves combining various activities at the same level in the organization and adding them to the existing job. The objective of job enlargement is to motivate an employee by increasing his efforts and exposure towards achieving the organizational objectives as set forth for the job. By doing this, an employee can get a wider range of his or her objectives without his or her job in a repetitious manner. Next, we have the achievement power affiliation theory. So in the achievement power affiliation theory, it states that people have three needs. The first is the need to achieve. We are motivated by our desire to do something better or more. Second is need for power. We want to achieve a certain level of power or influence. And the third is the need for affiliation. We want to belong to a circle of people or a circle of friends, and we want to be liked. And the need for affiliation motivates us. In this theory, when a person achieves something, especially something great, power comes next. When one is powerful or influential, people would want to associate with that person. So this is the achievement, power, affiliation theory. And lastly, the motivation maintenance theory. In this theory, it states that motivation comes from the individual and not from the manager. Okay, meaning the motivation is internal and not external. And now let's move on to the styles of leadership. So the first style of leadership that we will discuss is the autocratic leadership. In the autocratic leadership, as you can see in our picture, there is absolute rule and power. There is little to no accountability, and everything revolves around the leader. So this is autocratic leadership. The second general style of leadership is the so-called democratic leadership. In the democratic leadership, there is a shared goal and decision making, which is opposite to the autocratic leadership. There is also equal accountability for members as well as for the leader, and all are equally important, not just the leader. And this style of leadership is people-centered. So as you can see, the democratic leadership is the exact opposite of the autocratic leadership. And the third style of leadership, probably the best style of leadership among the three, is the situational leadership. The situational leadership is dictated by the status quo or the present condition. And this is a combination of styles. And this is also a flexible leadership. So as you can see in the picture, sometimes the leader will implement an autocratic leadership, sometimes a democratic leadership, depending on the need and the situation in the organization. So this is situational leadership, which is based on the present situation or the status quo of the company. Now let's move on to the different Filipino management styles. So we can see these styles of management in the Philippine setting. First, we have the manager by Kayod. So a manager by Kayod is action-hungry and committed, and his manners are rather serious than those of an introvert or the silent type people. So that is a manager by Kayod. Next is the manager by Lusot. So a manager by Lusot finds loopholes to avoid hard work or utilize an excuse for failures. We also have the manager by Libro. A manager by Libro is a kind of manager who literally goes by the book. So these are the bookish types of managers. Next, we have the manager by Oído. Oído comes from a Spanish term which means to listen. So a manager by Oído acquires his managerial skills by playing it by ear. He depends on practical experience to compensate for his lack of normal management education. And lastly, the manager by Ugnayan. A manager by Ugnayan is participative and coordinative. He integrates various styles depending on the organization's need and conditions. So these are the different Filipino management styles. Our next topic will be on communication, and let us all together watch the following video.
Lesson 3, Communication. So, communication applies to all management functions from planning, organizing, staffing, leading, and then controlling. So, under leading, it also applies. So, its general purpose for the organization is to bring positive changes that influence activities leading to the firm's welfare. So, let's discuss more about communication. So, the communication process starts with the sender who has an idea or a message which is then transmitted to a selected channel to the receiver. So, who in turn must be ready for the reception of the message so that it could be decoded into thoughts. So, accurate communication occurs when the sender and the receiver understand one another according to Hobbes and Coulter. So, these types or the types of communication may be verbal or non-verbal. So verbal meaning you can use oral or written words, and then non-verbal you can use through body movements, gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, and by touching. So, communication can also be classified as formal if the communication takes place within prescribed routine organizational work arrangements, or it can be informal if communication is not defined by an organization's hierarchical structure. So this communication is formal when the manager gives an assignment to a subordinate, and informal when employees talk to their friends in the office about a weekend party or a vacation which they plan to take. So for today, we're also going to discuss the direction and flow of communication. So communication flows in different directions within an organization. So it can be vertical, upward, downward, horizontal or lateral, or diagonal. So we're going to discuss what are the differences between this um, flow of communication. First one, we have vertical communication. So it involves communication flow between people belonging to different organizational levels. So, ibig sabihin, dito sa vertical communication, so yung communication where information or messages flows within the top level of the organizational structure and bottom level of the organizational structure. So, kaya yung parang flow or communication flow ay from the different organizational levels. Next is upward communication. So, the flow of information from an employee who belongs to a lower hierarchical level to the boss or manager who belongs to a higher hierarchical level. So, meaning under upward communication, the employees or subordinates, so as you can see in the picture, may communicate upward regarding their personal problems, requests that they would like the boss or managers to approve issues with coworkers and others. So, meaning they can easily communicate upward from the employee to the manager. Next is downward communication. So the flow of information from the manager who belongs to a higher hierarchical level to the subordinates or employees who belong to lower hierarchical levels. So example are when the boss gives orders to subordinates to finish certain tasks or communicates organizational policies and practices and comments about work performance among others. So meaning lang dito yung communication or your information will be coming from the manager and then to the employees. Horizontal or lateral communication. So this takes place among employees belonging to the same hierarchical level. So, members of cross-functional teams who belong to different units or departments but occupy the same organizational level make use of this type of communication in order to save time and facilitate coordination. So, like for example, as you can see in the picture, the communication or information are flowing from the production manager, finance manager, marketing manager, and service manager. So they are the same in the hierarchical level. They are all managers. So they do that in order to coordinate the functions or the things being done in the organization. And as well as you can see here, the employee 1 or employee 2 from the different departments under one organization are also having their communication also for the coordination of the works under the organization. Last one is the diagonal communication. So this entails communicating with someone or others who belong to the different departments or units and different hierarchical levels. So, for example, an employee belonging to the company's financial management department communicates directly with the head of the human resource department about his personal complaint against a marketing department employee. Take note of the different departments and different organizational levels of the persons communicating with each other. So, 'di ba, ang nag-complain is from the financial management department. And then, ang kinausap niya is from another department, which is dun sa human resource department. And then, yung kinocomplain na person is coming from the marketing department. So, iba-iba sila ng organizational level and then, or iba-iba sila ng departments. So, diagonal communication is said to be beneficial because of its efficiency and speed. However, it may also cause some confusion. So, dahil nga iba-iba sila ng department or iba-iba ng organization level, so that's why it can cause some confusion. Again, those are the direction and flow of communication in an organization. So now we're done understanding the different direction and flow of communication. It is also important for us to understand what can happen during the communication inside in an organization. So, organization members may encounter various types of barriers that can alter the meaning of communications that they receive. So, for example, dun sa downward communication from manager to employees, meron nagiging barriers wherein napapalitan yung meaning ng information na for example, gustong iparating nung manager. So, that's barriers to communication. So, these barriers include filtering, emotions, information overload, defensiveness, language, and national culture. So, first one is filtering. So, it is the shaping of information communicated in order to make it look good or advantageous to the receiver. So, for example, a sales agent may report to his manager the big amount of sales that he was able to make with one of their customers, but fails to report the complaints he received from other customers regarding their products. So, meaning, si sales agent, finifilter niya or kinoconceal or yung magaganda lang yung sinasabi niya kay manager. And then sa side naman ni manager, it is really beautiful or maganda na um yung naririnig or nire-report ni sales agent is yung mataas na sales, yes, but if hindi nasabi ni sales agent na marami nagre-reklamo regarding their product, so it can cause some serious issues or problems within the organization. So next one is emotions, the interpretation of communications which may be influenced by extreme emotions felt by the receiver. So, for example, a manager who is in a very bad mood and receives good news may not see the positive aspect of it because his rational thinking process is affected by his emotional judgment. So, ibig sabihin lang dito, humahalo yung emosyon dun sa pag interpret mo nung information na nakukuha mo through the communications. So, ibig sabihin dito, parang yung hindi na siya clear or hindi na siya um, information lang which is naghumahalo na yung emotions mo. So it is one of the things na iniiwasan in an organization kasi syempre it can cause serious problems or issues within the organization. So as a professional, we are bound to limit or control our emotions. Next one is information overload. So it is another barrier to good communication since there are too many pieces of information received by an individual may have a negative effect on a person's processing capacity. So, 'di ba, like a student, if there are too many things to understand or there are too many concepts, so nasasabi natin yung information overload. So, 'di ba, each one of us or each individuals, meron na silang processing capacity na yun lang yung kayang i-process na information ng utak nila. So, if it is being too much, so doon na nangyayari yung information overload. So, for example, the hundreds of job applicants received by human resource managers through email may be too many for them to read fully and respond to accurately. So, ibig sabihin, dito naman sa side ni human resource managers, sobra-sobrang information through the job applications yung nare-receive niya. So, that is beyond his or her processing capacity. So, kaya ang nangyayari since there are too many information or information overload, hindi niya na mababasa ng maayos lahat ng applications and hindi na din sila makakapag-respond accurately. So next one is defensiveness. So this is the act of self-protection when people are threatened by something or someone. So due to this feeling, people may resort to communicating lies in order to protect themselves or to interpret communications differently to defend their interest. So thus reducing mutual understanding. So dito sa defensiveness, in order for you, for example, to protect yourself, nagkakaroon ka na ng communication lies or yung nasasabi mo na is information na mali. So, ang nangyayari is, dinedefend mo, for example, yung sarili mo, yun nga, yung self-protection, and at the same time, nagkakaroon ng commotion within the organization or dun sa mga members ng organization, kasi nga, parang nagsispread ka ng lies. And at the same time, bumababa yung mutual understanding mo within the employees or the members of the organization. So, for example naman, if yung coworker mo, so siya yung nagiging defensive or sine-self-protect niya yung sarili niya, 'di ba? Parang magkakaroon ka ng ilang or parang magkakaroon kayo ng something na parang hindi maganda. So, kunyari ikaw, tas ganun yung pinapakita niya sa'yo. So, parang hindi kayo mas magkakaintindihan if he or she is always doing that or being defensive of the things that he or she have done. So that's one barrier to communication. So next one is language. So it could also hamper good communications because words used may have different meanings to different people belonging to different age, educational background, or cultural group. So the diversity of background of organization members may influence the language or the words that they use. So 'di ba nga in an organization it can really be a diverse organization wherein iba-iba or iba-iba ng upbringing or iba-iba ng culture and then iba-iba ng language yung mga tao sa iisang organization. So like for example, the word hello may just be an ordinary greeting to the older members of an organization, but the same word hello may have a negative connotation to the younger group of the employees or of employees depending on the context. So, ibig sabihin, parang nagkakaroon ng language barrier within the organization. Wherein, iba yung, for example, iba yung perception ng gantong group sa organization dun sa isa pang group sa organization. So, the last barrier to communication is the national culture. So, just like language, the prevailing national culture may also cause problems in communication among members of an organization, especially if it is multinational company. So, kasi kapag multinational companies, so ibig sabihin, iba't iba talaga ng nationalities yung employees or yung members ng organization. So, certain office practices like sending formal memoranda to employees may be negatively interpreted by employees coming from another country with a different culture that values face-to-face interpersonal communication. So, ibig sabihin nun, for that organization, normal lang yung pagpapadala nung memoranda sa employees. But since, for example, another employee is coming from a different culture, or yung culture niya nga is mas okay yung face-to-face for communication, so matitake niya into negatively yung pagpapadala ng formal memoranda. So, that negative interpretation may, in turn, cause employee dissatisfaction and less motivation to perform their work well. So, also, minsan, di ba, meron mga punto or meron mga tone ng voice na iba-iba per nationality, di ba? So, kung ano yung normal, for example, in this nationality or this group of people, can be iba yung dating to some certain people or some certain group of people. So, parang dahil doon, nagkakaroon ng promotion or yun nga, employee dissatisfaction and it can also lead to demotivation. So, our main goal here is how can we overcome these communication barriers? So, to avoid conflicts resulting from communication problems, managers try to overcome communication barriers through the following. So, we have using feedback, using simple language, controlling emotions, active listening, and observing body language. So, first one is using feedback. This is usually done by asking questions about a memo sent to subordinates or by asking them to give their comments or suggestions. So, in doing so, they are able to determine whether the communication they sent out was understood the way they originally intended. So, ibig sabihin, through that feedback, malalaman nila kung naparating ba nila ng maayos yung message talaga na gusto nilang sabihin and hindi siya na misinterpret nung naka-receive nung memo or nung message. So next one is using simple language. So this is done by avoiding uncommon terms and flowery words that may just cause misinterpretation. Language use must fit the level of understanding of the intended recipients of the communication. So ibig sabihin, effective communication is achieved when the message is understood by those who received it. So, ginagawa or pwede mong gawing simple na lang yung language since or kung ano man yung language na kung saan mas maiintindihan ng nakakarami or nung intended recipients mo. Kasi for example, ang gusto mong um, makaintindi nung memo mo or nung information na sasabihin mo is yung mga hindi masyadong sanay mag-English. So, if you use flowery words or yung mga uncommon terms, so, merong chance or there is really a high chance na hindi nila maintindihan yung sinasabi or ma-misinterpret nila yung meaning nung sinasabi mo. So, kapag sinimplihan mo lang yung language kung saan mas maintindihan nila, edi mas magiging maayos yung communication or yung information na masasabi mo. And um, maiiwasan natin yung mga communication problems. Next is active listening. This means listening well in order to grasp the full meaning of the communication. So, hearing without giving full attention to what others seek to communicate usually results in misinterpretations and communication distortions. So, kapag meron nagsasalita or meron kang kausap, kailangan full yung attentions mo sa kanya. Especially, for example, employee siya na may gustong sabihin sa'yo na importante. So, kailangan full yung attention mo. Kasi, if hindi full yung attention mo or if hindi nagkakaroon ng active listening, baka ma-interpret mo yung pwedeng sinasabi ni employee. And also, at the same time, if si employee naman, hindi siya nagpo-fully attention or wala siyang full attention dun sa sinasabi ni manager, so, it can also result to communication distortions or, kunyari, may binibigay na certain task or instruction si manager and then hindi nagiging focus si employee to give his or her full attention dun sa sinasabi ni manager. So, most probably, hindi niya maayos or hindi niya magagawa ng tama yung gustong pagawa ni manager. So, it should be really or there should be really active listening. So next is controlling emotions. So this is another method of overcoming communication misinterpretation. So when the receiver is affected by the extreme anger, his interpretation of a message received may not be accurate. Or on the other hand, when the sender is affected by extreme emotions, he or she may also send or transmit inaccurate information. Therefore, it is important to practice emotional restraint or yun nga sinasabi natin as a professional, you should be or you should control your emotions, especially if you're in an organization na marami kang nakakasalamuha or maraming factors na kailangang i-consider. So last one, how to overcome communication barriers is through observing body language. So this also influences how communication is interpreted. So actions of the message receiver, like throwing away a letter delivered to him, betrays his negative feelings regarding its message, even if he says yes or okay to what is requested. Kasi 'di ba usually kapag tinrow mo yung letter na dineliver sa'yo, so, parang meron siyang negative connotation. So, if either yes or okay yung sinabi mo dun sa request, pero yung action mo naman is like that, so it can cause misinterpretations. Oh, so, nonverbal cues must always be watched because, as the saying goes, actions speak louder than words. So, as a person or as an professional individual, you must always be mindful of your body language or yung mga non-verbal cues mo. Kasi nga, pwedeng iba yung sinasabi mo dun sa action na pinapakita mo. So, para hindi ka ma-misinterpret, so kailangan you also look out for that. So also, this is not only practiced by the subordinates or yung mga employees, but also especially the managers and the leaders since kailangan, katulad ng mga employees is kung ano yung sinasabi nila, yun din yung ginagawa nila. Kasi nga 'di ba, as a leader, um you influence and you also motivate your employees. So parang it always starts from you. So kung ipinapakita mo na ganun ka, so most probably ma-influence din yung mga employees mo ay magiging mindful na din dun sa body language nila. So again, those are the things on how can we overcome communication barriers. So hindi lang naman siya magagamit ng mga employees and managers but also you students, pwede nyo din silang gamitin to overcome communication barriers with your teachers or with your classmates or with your parents at home or with the people na nakakasalamuhan nyo din. So, hindi lang naman nagsisimula yung isang bagay sa pagpasok sa isang organization or sa pagiging isang employee, but mas maganda ngayon pa lang, simulan nyo na din na mas magkaroon ng proper communication with the people that you are encountering with. And that's the true spirit of being a leader. And that's the end of chapter 6, leading.
Now that we have completed the discussion on the process of leading, our next topic will be on controlling. And let us all together watch the following video with the following content.
Hi class, so welcome back to our subject, Organization and Management. So our lesson for today is all about controlling. So this is the last function of the management that we are going to discuss. So if you can remember or if you can recall, we already discussed planning, staffing, leading, and organizing. So for today, we're going to discuss controlling. So, before we start, let's have a quick introduction of controlling. So, controlling is a management function wherein we ensure that the work performance of the organization's members are aligned with the organization's values and standards through monitoring, comparing, and correcting their actions. So, para siyang luxurious car na walang gasoline. So, para siyang business na hindi naman na manage ng ayos or hindi na manage ng ayos yung mga resources or yung mga funds. So, like that luxurious car who needs that vehicle na hindi mo naman kayang patakbuhin. So, parang business, hindi mo kailangan ng business sa ganon but hindi naman siya kayang i-manage or i-control ng maayos. So, parang mapuput into waste lang yung mga resources na pinut up dun sa business or dun sa organization. So, that's why it is very important that the management really knows how to control the resources. And also, not just the resources, but also, kinokontrol din nila yung performance or they are ensuring that the performance of the members is aligned with the values and the standards of the organization. So, through monitoring, again, comparing and correcting the actions, so magiging na or mas nagiging maayos yung pagkocontrol dun sa organization. So, we are going to discuss more of this later on. So, under chapter 7, we're going to discuss three main lesson or topics. First is the definition and nature of management control. Next is the control methods and systems. And for the last lesson, it will be application of management control in accounting and marketing concepts and techniques. Lesson 1, definition and nature of management control. So previously or during the introduction of controlling, we said that controlling is a management function wherein we ensure that the performance of the organization's members are aligned with the organization's values and standards. But also under management control, um, the management need to make sure that the firm's operating cash flow is sufficient, efficient, and if possible, profitable when invested. So, ibig sabihin, yung controlling, hindi lang siya dun sa mga employees mo, but also to your resources as a whole. 'Di ba? Resources, it can be your human resources and also resources in the form of the cash, in form of your inventories, or in form of your assets. So, kailangan lahat is maayos yung pagkocontrol. So, as you can see here, it is important to make sure na yung operating cash natin is sufficient and efficient and, if possible, profitable. So, the ultimate goal of an organization is to earn profit. That's why one of the things that you need to make sure is that you're earning. And at the same time, kailangan sufficient siya para dun sa operation ng business mo. Like you can pay for the salaries of your employees, or you can pay for the day-to-day normal expenses of your business. Why do you think na ito yung isa sa mga hina-highlight when we talk about control? Kasi cash is very revolving in any business. So, ibig sabihin, madali yung paglabas and pagpasok ng pera. So, if you don't have a proper control or management of that, so mas madali kang manakawan. Like, for example, you don't have some things or some activities na hindi mo na make sure na maayos yung recording ng mga cash na nare-receive mo. So, it is susceptible na yung mga employees mo mas madaling makapagnakaw sa'yo. Wherein, magiging pangit or eventually, makikita din yon sa records and baka in the near future, ito pa yung maging sanhi kung bakit mapabagsak yung business. So, that's why management control is very important. So, it doesn't involve only the operating cash flow but yung day-to-day activities or yung mga nangyayari sa management that involves, of course, for the business to operate. So, in addition, we have the control process. So, control techniques used for controlling financial resources, office management, quality assurance, and others are essentially the same. So, typical control process involves establishing standards, measuring and reporting actual performance, and comparing it with standards, and taking action. So the first one in the control process is establishing standards. So it means setting criteria for performance. So the managers must identify priority activities that have to be controlled, followed by determining how these activities must be properly sequenced. So in doing so, managers will be able to set key performance standards that need to be achieved. So the value chain or the proper sequencing of activities needed to convert the company's raw materials into finished goods is a valuable instrument for helping managers determine and establish key performance standards. So parang So here in establishing standards, para siyang, kunyari, meron kang pa-contest or pa-singing contest. So before sumalang or kumanta yung mga contestant, yung management and then yung judges, nagsiset sila ng criteria for judging. So it is the same in organization or businesses. So you're setting criteria for performance of your employees na doon mo parang i-gauge yung ginagawa nila or yung nangyayari dun sa organization mo. So, from there, nagkakaroon ka ng standard. So, again, hindi lang siya sa performance ng mga employees, but also sa performance or dun sa activities that are happening in your business. Next is measuring and reporting actual performance and comparing it with set standards. So it is essentially the monitoring of performance. So to be able to do this, managers must develop appropriate information systems which will help them identify, collect, organize, and disseminate information. Managers are able to control facts and figures called data and information which have been given meaning and considered to have value. Analysis of data or information gathered measure actual performance and comparing it with set standards serve as a means for detecting deviations, and those deviations must be revealed as early as possible in order to correct them. So, under this monitoring of the performance, so usually meron ngang mga information systems, especially if it is a big organization or business. So, parang mas madali yung pag-collect or pag-identify ng mga data, and then madali mo din siya maiko-compare dun sa sinet mong standards. So, if meron kang deviation or parang kakulangan or hindi na-meet yung standards. So, as early as possible, kailangan banggitin mo na agad siya or i-relay mo na talaga agad siya. And that is for to be able to parang mas madali or mas maaga, mas maaagapan para mas madali mo silang mako-correct din. So the last step under the control process is taking action. So it involves the correction of deviations from set standards. So this activity clearly shows the control function of management. Managers may rectify deviations by modifying their plans or goals, by improving the training of employees, by firing inefficient subordinates, or by practicing more effective leadership techniques. So, through those things, yun yung parang taking action mo na dun sa nakita mong deviations. Like, di ba, nag-set ka ng standards and then you measure and then you report yung comparison or yung difference between the set standards and in the actual performance or the activities within the organization. And then now, you take the action. So, ito na talaga yung control function ng mga managers. So, ano na ba yung magiging solution nila kung bakit nagkaroon nung mga deviations na yon? So, if nakikita nila na parang technical problems lang naman, so they can train more their employees. Or if meron talagang sobrang inefficient na subordinates, then they need to make a decision to fire him or her. And then, or if nakikita naman nila na parang sa side nila as leaders, yung parang nagkakaroon ng dahilan kung bakit nagkakaroon ng mga deviations, so parang mas kailangan nilang progress or mag-practice ng effective leadership techniques. So, that's the control process sa organization and management. Next lesson is all about control methods and systems. Control methods are techniques used for measuring an organization's financial stability, efficiency, effectiveness, production output, and organization members' attitude and morale. So, from the general point of view, managerial effectiveness must be concerned with the maximizing of the above-mentioned factors that are measured by the control methods. So, therefore, the challenge for present-day managers is to devise control methods and systems that are aligned and consistent and will help attain these concerns. So, meaning, ang kailangang mag-devise ng control methods is yung mga managers. So, kailangan nilang i-assure na yung mga factors na to is magiging maayos or makokontrol nila ng maayos through those control methods and systems. So for today, we will be discussing what are the control methods. So we have quantitative methods and non-quantitative methods. So the firm may apply control techniques or methods which either be these two. So ano nga ba yung difference nila? So let's start with quantitative methods. Quantitative methods are methods which make use of data and different tools expressed in members for monitoring and controlling production output. output. So, ibig sabihin dito, meron ka talagang actual na kino-quantify. So, meron tayong quantity. So, it can be numbers or certain outputs. So, like that. So, under quantitative methods, we have charts, budgets, and audit. So, let's discuss first charts. Charts is the most widely recognized quantitative tool. So it is used as control tools, normally contrast time and performance. So the visual impact of a chart often provides the quickest method of relating data. So, ibig sabihin, dito sa mga chart, 'di ba, pag nagagawa tayo ng chart, mas madali nating makikita yung parang current situation or current na nangyayari through charts. So, let's head to the next slide. So, as you can see here, this chart shows the sales trend. So, for condo and co-op, ito yung parang performance or ito yung nangyayari, and then singles family, and then for the total, ito. So, parang siya yung mas madali agad nating makikita, or if it is displayed graphically, madali nating check yung mga quantity or yung mga data or information na meron tayo. So, if the managers use this control method, makikita nila agad yung parang performance or yung mga nangyari, and then they can identify what are the reasons behind this, and moving forward, what are the actions for them by just looking at this chart. So that's the use of this chart or quantitative method. Another quantitative method is budgets. So, budget remains the best known control device. So, it is an expression in financial terms of a plan for meeting the organization's goal for a specific period. A budget is an instrument of planning, management, and control. So, di ba, kapag sinabi nating budget, so, parang nagpa-plan tayo. And then, minamanage natin siya. And then, at the same time, we control. So, ano yung kino-control natin? So, yung mga finances natin. So, yun yung ibig sabihin kung bakit tayo nagba-budget. So, budgets are used in two ways. So the first one is to establish facts that must be taken into account during planning. So ano yung ibig sabihin nito? So from previous data, or from the data of your competitors, or from the actual data, or the based on the actual market that is happening currently, so para nakakapag-establish ka ng mga facts na pwede mong gamitin sa pagpaplano. Like for example, for this year, hanggang magkano yung kaya nating ubusin, for example, for utilities expense, or for the salaries of the employees, or nagkano for example yung iba-budget natin na ibebentang gantong products. So, dito yung parang ini-establish mo yung facts na pwede mong gamitin dun sa pagpaplano mo. And the next one is to prepare a description and financial information to be used by chain of command to request for and manage funds. So, once na nakapag-establish siya nung facts, and then na-take into consider mo na siya dun sa planning, so makakagawa ka na ng budget, and then makakapag-prepare ka na ng proper description and financial information na kailangan mong gamitin para, for example, sa tingin mo, ito talaga yung kailangan nating iset na budget for this expense. So, parang mas ma-manage natin yung funds, and then makapag-request tayo dun sa mga upper or higher ups for this certain expense na sa tingin talaga natin, and based on facts na kulang, for example, yung gantong budget. So, usually, in the government, ginagamit din nila to, yung pagbabudget, especially, wala naman silang clear na alam kung magkano yung expenses na, for example, mai-incur nila per year. Kaya kung malalaman nyo, or if you are aware of, na 'di ba nagkakaroon ng hearing for certain budgets of different government bodies. Like for example, yung sa DepEd, yung sa DTI. So parang meron silang kanya-kanyang budget. So, yun yung quantitative method na ginagamit nila. So another quantitative method is audit. So it measures and evaluates the effectiveness of management controls. So under audit surveys or audit, there is a independent person or group of people na magko-quantify or mag-check or mag-audit ng mga operations, ng mga programs, activities, and also the finances, especially the financial statements. So, ang gagawin nila sa pag-audit is to check if yung proper controls ba ay talagang maayos na nai-implement. Kasi, di ba, for example, maganda talaga yung control methods ng isang organization, but if it is not properly implemented, so parang baliwala lang din, di ba? So, through audit, check nila if talaga bang nagiging maayos yung controls or if talagang nagagawa. And then at the same time, if yung utilization ng funds and yung resources is properly managed, properly recorded, and if lahat ba talaga is truthful. So, iyon yung chine-check ng audit. So, like yung kanina, 'di ba? Example natin yung sa government. So, meron tayong tinatawag na Commission on Audit. So, sila yung nag-audit ng mga budget or yung mga finances or yung mga operations na nangyayari dun sa mga government bodies natin. So, yun. So, chine-check nila yung mga programs, yung mga activities, and then yung mga systems. So, if you're planning to take up accountancy, under the accountancy program, pag-aaralan nyo din tong audit. We have the auditing theory, auditing problems. So, hindi lang yung mismong processes. So, but also yung mga actual na nangyayari dun sa parang financial statements ng mga businesses. So, the accountants or CPAs can also be auditors. And usually, ganun talaga yung nangyayari. So, in order for you to practice audit, so you must be a certified public accountant. So, that's the quantitative methods. Again, we have charts, budgets, and audit. So, now, let's discuss what is non-quantitative. Non-quantitative methods. So, these methods refer to the overall control of performance instead for only of specific organizational processes. So, ito na yung overall control. So, we have inspections, reports, direct supervision, on-the-spot checking, performance evaluation, and counseling. So, as you can see, dun sa quantitative method, meron talaga tayong quantity na chine-check or meron tayong naka-quantify. Pero dito sa non-quantitative, wala. So, it is more of the control na meron dun sa organization, and then i-check mo yung overall nun as to their performances or processes. So, aside from the quantitative and non-quantitative methods, so we also have other control methods. So, it include feed-forward control, concurrent control, feedback control, employee discipline, and project management control. So, first one, feed-forward control. So, it prevents problems because managerial action is taken before the actual problem occurs. So, ito yung control na bago pa mangyari yung actual problem, so meron ka ng control or meron ka ng ginagawa para ma-prevent yung mga ganong problema. So, ito yung tinatawag natin na feed-forward control. So, for example, in factories, so nagsiset ka ng alarm na, for example, umabot sa gantong temperature yung factory natin. So, para mag-a-alarm siya. So, para maiwasan natin yung over temperature na, for example, very vital dun sa business mo or dun sa mga products na pinoproduce mo. So, that's feed forward control. So, next one is concurrent control. So, it takes place while work activity is happening. One example of this is tracking by GPS so that the managers can monitor the company vehicles. So, madedetermine ni managers kung saan papunta yung vehicles or if nakapunta talaga sila dun sa actual destinations, and also they can check the speed of the delivery between the destinations na kailangan nilang puntahan or ipag-deliver. So, through that, nagkakaroon sila ng control as to kung paano yung nangyayari or the actual activity or process na nangyayari during the delivery. Next one is feedback control. So, it is a control that takes place after the occurrence of the activity. So, after nung certain activity, humihingi kayo ng feedback kung ano yung nangyari dun sa activity na yon, kung ano yung comments or yung suggestions. So, usually, di ba, katulad ng mga ginagawa namin na teachers, so, after the lesson or after the discussion or after the activity, we ask for feedback. So, kung ano yung, for example, kung ano yung natutunan nyo or kung saan kayo nahirapan or what are your comments or suggestion in order to improve the current activity or the current process of the discussion. So, that's feedback control. So, if the managers will choose one of these first three other control methods, so pipiliin nila yung feed forward. So, bakit? Because it is a preventive action. 'Di ba? Meron nga tayong kasabihan na prevention is better than cure. So, under concurrent control pala, its advantage is that it can help managers correct problems before they become too costly or damaging. Kasi nga, di ba, yung control natin for concurrent is nagtitake place during the activity. So, bago pa maging sobrang damaging, so, makakatulong na agad siya kay manager para maiwasan yon. So, kay feedback control naman, so, ang advantage niya is that it exhibits variance between the standard and the actual performance. Kasi, di ba, it takes place after the actual activity. So, little variance indicates that the planning is successful, while if there is a significant variance, so it may give the managers an idea of how to plan better. So, yan yung parang or dyan nagagamit nung mga managers yung gantong control methods. So, in addition to other control methods, we have employee discipline. So, it is a control challenge for managers. So, why? It is because enforcing discipline in a workplace is not easy. So, there are concerns regarding this, including workplace privacy, employee theft, and workplace violence, among others. So, parang yung pag-discipline is pwede siyang mag-start from simple monitoring of employees' computer usage. Like for example, bawal mag-Facebook, bawal mag-check ng kung ano-ano, kailangan lang talaga gamitin si computer for work-related items. And then, it can go beyond to protecting employees at work from psychologically unstable workers who may have hidden desires to harm them. So, managers need discipline control to ensure that the task can be efficiently and effectively carried out as planned. So, parang gumagawa sila or gumagawa yung mga managers ng discipline control para ma-make sure na parang malalayo din sa harm yung mga employees. And then, if magiging okay lahat, if properly manage and control yung parang employees natin, so yung mga plans and other operations under the business can be carried out efficiently and effectively. And then the last one is the project management control. So this ensures that the task of getting a project's activities done on time, within the budget, and according to specifications is successfully carried out. So project managers need technical and interpersonal skills to control the implementation of the project efficiently and effectively. So kasi itong mga project na to, usually there's a deadline na kailangan by this time tapos na to. And at the same time, it can also affect the budget. Kasi for certain project, meron ka lang inaalat na budget dyan. So, usually, if it exceeds beyond the time or beyond the deadline, so most probably the budget will also exceed. So kailangan mas maayos yung pagpa-plan and pagko-control nung implementation nung project na to. So the project planning process controls include defining the objectives, identifying activities and resources, establishing sequence and estimating time for activities, determining the project completion date, and comparing with objectives and determining additional resource requirements. So again, those are the other control methods. So, after discussing the definition and the nature of management control and then the control methods and systems, so let's head to the last topic under controlling, which is the application of management control in accounting and marketing concepts and techniques. So for quick introduction, a recap for the ABM 12 and a introduction of accounting to ABM 11. So accounting is a service activity. Its function is to provide quantitative information, primarily financial in nature, about economic entities that is intended to be useful in making economic decisions. So, accounting is also the art of recording, classifying, and summarizing in a significant manner and in terms of money, transactions, and events, which are in part at least of financial character and interpreting the results thereof. So, management control in accounting and finance is the control that makes use of the balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow to analyze and examine financial statements in order to determine the company's financial soundness and viability, as well as the financial ratios to determine the company's stability. So I guess for ABM 11, you've already encountered this balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow statement as we have already discussed this during accounting part 2. But for ABM 11, so it can be alien word for you. This balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow statement are part of the financial statements that are being made or that the companies or organizations have. So they use these statements to analyze and examine the the company's performance or the results of their operation. So through the financial ratios and the amounts or the reports that included in those statements or in those financial statements. So, madedetermine yung company's stability. On the other hand, marketing refers to activities a company undertakes to promote the buying or selling of a product or service. So it thus includes advertising, selling, and delivering products to consumers or other businesses. So the management control in marketing is a control that makes use of projected sales or forecasts, statistical models, econometric modeling, surveys, historical demand data, and actual consumption of their products. So, why is it important? So, in business, sales is considered to be the lifeblood of the business. So, without sales, walang kikitain sa company. So, marketing since ito yung activity wherein you promote the selling of your product or your service, so it is very vital na meron kang management control sa pagmamarket. So again, it relates with the sales, which is the lifeblood of the business. So let's discuss more on how can we do the management control in accounting and in marketing. So, as I told you earlier, in accounting, we do or we make use of the financial ratios in order to determine the company's stability or the current performance or the results of the operation of the business. So, from the amounts that are recorded or reported in the financial statements, so we have some ratios para ma-check if um, ano ba yung nagiging lagay nung business natin. So, the goal of business, of course, is to gain profit. So, in order to achieve this, managers need accounting and financial controls. Kasi again, babalik na naman tayo na kailangan properly recorded lahat ng accounting transactions and lahat ng nangyayari dun sa business para properly accounted of siya. So, managers must also analyze the organization's financial condition, which is done with the help of the following financial ratios. So, in accounting, di ba magsisimula siya sa journalizing or the recording of the transactions, then it will go to up to the preparation of the financial statements. So, hindi lang siya matatapos dun sa preparation ng financial statements. So, kailangan meron din tayong pag-analyze nung financial statements na yon para mas makapag-come up tayo with better planning or better solutions from the previous operation or mga previous activities na nangyari dun sa businesses natin. Kasi nga, again, those financial statements are the results of or the performance of your business. So, through these financial ratios na nakaset up, mas ma-check pa natin or mas ma-analyze pa natin yung accounting side or yung finance side nung business. So, for ABM 12, this is actually a recap or review of what we have discussed last semester under the analysis and interpretation of the financial statements. So previously, we've talked about or we've discussed with so many financial ratios or accounting ratios. But for the sake of the ABM 11 students who doesn't have their accounting subject, so I trimmed down or I just included the most important ratios or yung mga basic ratios under accounting or financial control. So under accounting or financial control ratios, we have liquidity ratio, activity ratio, leverage ratio, and profitability ratio. So first one is the liquidity ratio. So it tests the organization's ability to meet short-term obligations. It may also refer to as a test done when inventories turn over slowly or are difficult to sell. So what do we mean by liquidity or bakit siya natin tinawag na liquidity ratio? So ano ba yung properties ng liquid? So for example, we have a water and then nilagay natin siya sa baso. So, yung magiging shape na ng liquid is same dun sa pinaglagyan niya. So, dun sa baso. Like, for example, ilagay naman natin siya sa plastic. So, pag nilagay natin siya sa plastic, yung magiging shape niya is kung ano din yung shape ng plastic. So, in business, business liquidity is determined by how quickly a business can convert its asset into cash. So, parang in broad sense naman, yung liquid natin kanina is kung kaano siya kabilis na magko-convert dun sa parang shape ng baso. Wherein yun sa business, again, going back, is kung gaano mo mako-convert yung asset into cash. Kasi yung cash, siya yung gagamitin natin para for our day-to-day operations or yung mga expenses natin and also for our short-term obligations or yung mga liabilities natin. So that's why our ratio or how can we compute for the current ratio or the liquidity ratio is current assets divided by current liabilities. So again, just a recap for the ABM 12 and for the ABM 11, assets are the resources controlled by the entity wherein future economic benefits are expected to flow in the entity. So, parang in Tagalog, assets are yung mga may halaga na bagay na pag-aari mo or pag-aari ng kumpanya. While current liabilities or liabilities are the present obligations wherein in order for that present obligations to be settled, outflow of the entity is needed. So, liabilities in short is your utang. So, yung mga utang ng kumpanya mo or ng business mo. So, kaya naman natin siya tinawag na current kasi in financial statements, we have current and non-current. So, yung asset and yung liability, it can be current or non-current. So, ibig sabihin, kapag current, the assets are expected to be converted to cash within a year or kung ano yung accounting period. But if we say that it is a non-current asset, so parang mako-convert pa siya or makukuha mo pa yung mga benefit ng assets na yon is magbi-beyond dun sa 1 year. So same as with liabilities, if you think that within a year, mababayaran mo siya, so it is a current liabilities. But if it will go beyond a year, so ibig sabihin magiging non-current liabilities na siya. So parang yung mga utang na na hindi mo kayang mabayaran within a year. So again, kaya siya under liquidity ratio kasi ito nga yung parang test or ability kung saan mas mabilis na makakapag-convert yung mga asset natin into cash para pambayad or pang-meet ng mga short-term obligations natin. Kaya ang directly affected is yung current assets and yung current liabilities natin. Next is leverage ratio. So it determines if the organization is technically insolvent, meaning that the organization's financing is mainly coming from borrowed money or from the owner's investments. So, ang pagiging insolvent ay parang bankrupt or parang para makapag-operate ka, kailangan mo ng umutang ng pera or yung mga utang mo, hindi mo na kayang mabayaran. So, that's the meaning of insolvent. So, that's why here in leverage ratio, our ratio is the debt to assets ratio. So, the total debt or the total liabilities, lahat ng utang mo, i-divide mo dun sa total assets na meron ka. Kasi, paano mo ba mababayaran yung mga liabilities or yung mga utang mo? It is through those assets that you have. So that's why again, under leverage ratio, we have the debt to assets ratio, which is the total debt divided by the total assets. So next is the activity ratio. So it determines if the organization is carrying more inventory than what it needs. So the higher the ratio, the more efficiently inventory assets are being used. So here in activity ratio, it involves with the inventory. So ano ba yung inventory? Inventory are the goods or yung mga pagmamay-ari ng business na ibebenta nila or binebenta nila. So, yun yung parang source of income nila. Like, for example, nagbebenta sila ng lipstick. So, yung inventory nila is yung mga lipstick na yon. So, here in activity ratio, we have the inventory turnover. So, ibig sabihin, kung ilang beses natin nabebenta yung inventory natin for a certain period of time or for example, for a year. So, yun yung mine-measure nitong inventory turnover natin. So, that's why our formula for that is the cost of goods sold. So, ang ibig sabihin po nun is yung halaga ng inventory na binenta natin. So, kasi 'di ba, pag binenta natin siya, syempre papatungan na natin siya ng presyo. So, iyon yung parang sales natin. Pero kapag sinasabi natin cost of goods sold, ito yung halaga nung mismong actual na product. So kung paano or lahat ng expenses na na-incur para mabuo yung produkto na yon. So that's the cost of goods sold, and then you need to divide it with the average inventory. So yung inventory again is the number of the goods. And then, kaya natin sinasabing average, so it is usually, kasi meron kang beginning inventory and then meron kang ending inventory. So, yung beginning inventory, yung inventory mo at the starting of the year. Like for example, calendar year ka. So, at January 1, for example, yung beginning inventory mo is 10. And then, your ending inventory or yung inventory na hawak mo by December 31, 2020, for example, is 20. So, if you average that, so 10 plus 20 is equals to 30 divided by 2, so that would be 15. So your average inventory is 15. So again, it relates to the inventory turnover, or the measure of the number of times inventory is sold or used in a time period such as a year. Next one is the profitability ratio. So it determines the profits that are being generated. So when we say profit, it is different from sales. Kasi yung sales, ito yung total na kinita natin. Like for example, all the units we have or we sold is 10,000 units. And then the selling price or kung magkano natin siya binenta is 2 pesos. So, 2 pesos times the 10,000 units, so that's 20,000. So, our total sales is 20,000. But our profit is different from that. So, let's say that in order for us to come up or to sell that product, we incur certain expenses. Like, for example, the cost of goods sold or the salaries of the employees. So, let's say the total expenses amounts to 5,000. So, if we deduct that 5,000 to the actual sales of 20,000, we have the total profit or net profit of 15,000. So, if there's a given na amount of taxes, so like for example, yung 15,000 wala pa yung tax doon. So, if we deduct, for example, a tax of 2,000, to the 15,000, so magiging 13,000 na lang siya. So, the net profit after taxes is the 13,000. So, again, the difference between that and between profit and sales is that the profit is the net of all the expenses that the company incurred, while total sales is the actual sales that the company had. So another one under profitability ratio is the return on investment. So it measures the efficiency of assets to generate profits. So ito yung parang in return of the investments or of the assets, kung magkaano or kung magkano yung mapoprofit natin doon or ma-generate nating profit. So that's why our formula for that is net profit after taxes divided by the total assets. Kasi again, kung paano natin nagamit yung mga asset para makapag-generate ng profit. So again, how to compute return on investment, net profit after taxes divided by the total assets. So, in addition to the above ratios, asset management is also practiced to achieve organizational goals. So, asset management is the ability to use resources efficiently and operate at minimum cost. So, dito, yung resources natin is yung average inventory. So, that's why our formula for this is the inventory turnover. Kasi, if we divide the sales to the average inventory, parang makikita natin kung paano natin nagamit yung average inventory na yon in order to come up with the sales. So, Again, inventory turnover equals sales divided by average inventory. So, in addition to our discussion, we need to also discuss strategic control. So, ano nga ba tong strategic control? So, it is a systematic monitoring at control points that leads to the change in the organization's strategies based on the assessments done on the said strategic plans. So, as you can remember, we already discussed the strategic plan. So, these are the long-term directions or goals ng organization or businesses. So, when we say the strategic control, so ito yung pagmamonitor ng mga long-term direction natin or long-term plans ng isang organization. So, ang minsan, based on our assessment, dun sa mga nangyayari dun sa business or the results of the transactions. So, parang nagkakaroon tayo ng parang strategies or parang naiiba yung parang strategies natin or yung mga approach natin para mag-comply pa rin siya dun sa long-term direction or goal ng organization. So, this control provides a chance for comparing the plan's intended goals with the actual organizational performance. So, this becomes the basis for modifications in the firm's strategies. So another one is benchmarking. So this is an approach or process of measuring a company's own services and practices against those of recognized leaders in the industry in order to identify areas for improvement. So this benchmarking is widely used and well accepted approach because it helps organizations gather data and information against which performance can be measured and controlled. So many companies use benchmarking. So some prefer to benchmark only the top 10 or the best companies in their particular industry. So others benchmark best global practices and go further away from their own industry and reason out that their goal is competitive superiority and not just competitive party. So parang dito, meron kang nire-research or ginagather na data na parang pinagko-comparean mo nung current situation or current practices of your company. So from there, parang na-check mo ano ba yung parang gaano tayo kalapit sa kanila or ano pa yung mga kailangan nating gawin para maging katulad. Hindi naman technically para maging katulad. So for example, yun nga, as I told earlier, na usually yung mga top 10 or the best companies. So parang in order for us to be one of the best companies, so parang ginagawa natin silang benchmark of the, parang ginagawa natin silang standard para i-compare yung mga performances or current practices in our organization. So, the benchmarking process begins with determining which company functions are to be benchmarked and the company performance indicators to be measured. Then, the best industry performers have to be identified. So, data gathering and analysis follows, and this become the foundation for performance goals. So, new programs are implemented, and during this step, performance is measured at regular intervals. So, corrective actions are taken to close the gap between the organization and the best-in-class companies. The monitoring of results must be continuous to ensure benchmarking success. So, parang ito din yung control process natin, which is nagkakaroon tayo ng standard. So, in benchmarking, ang nagiging standard natin is yung mga top 10 or best companies or yung para bang parang in term na ina-idolize, parang somehow like that. So, from there, um, ichine-check natin, 'di ba? Sa second step natin is we check our performance on the standards that we have set. And then after that, we take corrective actions or we take actions to close the gap between the actual standards and the performance that we have. So that's the benchmarking.
And that's the end of the lesson for this week. I hope you have learned something, and make sure to watch the video again in case you missed some parts, and take the time to read or watch other sources related to this topic for further knowledge, and also make sure to complete the activities on your assessment package and pass them on time. Till then, see you in the next video.